so that it gives you a little bit nicer, crisper.
Morning, everybody. Craig Eicher here. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. Nice to see our special guest, Debra Johnson, has already joined. Good morning.
Good morning.
We'll be with everybody in just about 4 minutes.
Good morning, Craig.
Hello, Matt. How are you?
I'm great.
Great to see you. Oh, very well, thanks.
Good.
Nice to see we have Rob on and Erik. Hi, Jessica. Thanks for joining us today for your first meeting with us.
Good morning. Thank you. Good to see you.
Hi, Julie.
Hi, Julie. Julie and Julie. Good morning, Lynn.
Good morning, Craig. How are you?
Very well, thanks. I feel like romper room here. Remember, it's like I see Julie, I see Lynn.
I don't see myself, so
You don't?
I see you though.
I think I'm the only old person old enough to remember what romper room is.
I'm not sure about that. Is this your last? Is this your final finale?
Oh, yes, that's right. We're going to go out with a big bang.
Great. We hope we help.
All right. Hey, Chris, how's it going, man?
Hey, good morning. I'm doing well, thank you.
Great to see you. Great to see you.
Likewise.
Sans hat, though.
Yeah, it's over at my desk.
Feel free. I mean, you know. Someday I'm going to rock that Dwayne Johnson look like you do, you know.
Oh, right. only the opposite of Dwayne Johnson. I think I'm pretty much built the exact opposite way.
All right, just about 2 minutes. I hope everybody is getting on board here. Well, I'm showing 9 o'clock. Audrey, do you think we have everyone assembled? Are we ready?
Julie, can you respond to Craig's question, please?
Oh, hi, Julie. Yeah, do you?
Yes, we have, most of our panelists are on and we have 23 attendees now, so.
Okay. Great. Well, why don't we just start on time? I do think we have a lot to cover and some great people to hear from. So I want to make sure we take our time with the content today. Good morning. I'm Craig Eicher. Nice to see you folks. I'm the chair for this year's board of directors for Commuting Solutions. Of course, for already 20 years that we've been doing this as an organization, and this is already the third time we've had to meet online. Our first meeting of the year is now a distant memory. I can barely recall meeting with you folks in person, and I certainly hope it's not going to be very long before we're able to do that again, perhaps in 2021. Before we get started, a couple quick housekeeping items. Please add your name and organization to the chat. We'd love to know exactly who's here, and then of course that will give you the chance to ask questions during the Q&A sections that we'll have during the course of the morning. So that's where you would add your questions, and then we'll funnel those to the speakers and the panelists. We are recording this meeting for future use, and new to this membership meeting, we have some poll questions that we'll try to fit in during the course of the morning. We'd like to collect your attitudes about the topics that we'll be discussing this morning, and then allow our speakers to know exactly what you folks think. So thanks for attending. This is the 4th membership meeting of the year. It'll be the last one that I have the pleasure and the honor of leading, and we'll be handing the gavel over to our next chairman, and we'll be handling that in just a few seconds here. I'd like to begin by recognizing our 2020 Gold sponsors: Colorado High Performance Transportation Enterprise, Elevations Credit Union, my credit union, Google, RTD, and of course the rest of the sponsors are in the slideshow that you'll be seeing as well later. We have a special welcome to those of you who are brand new to our organization. We'd like to name you by name if that's okay. Nathaniel Tan, Patrick Brown, Erik Roth, David Canfield, David Fridland, Joseph Cerna, Jody Hughes, Kathy Junglin, Anthony Pratt, Roger Sherman, Julia Scanlon, Lisa Buckley, Adrian Lopez, Paige Henchen, Linda Andes Jorges or Georges. Sorry, I didn't ask you first how that goes. Scott Hatfield and Emily Tyler, we want to welcome you folks to the Commuting Solutions event, and are hoping that you're going to enjoy yourself. If this is the first time you're attending a membership meeting, Commuting Solutions is a nonprofit organization who serves as the Transportation Management Organization, TMO as we call them, for the Northwest Metro region. It's a role that we have proudly served for over 22 years to convene public, private, and nonprofit sector stakeholders regarding the regional transportation needs. Again, thank you for joining us here today. I think you're going to learn a lot if this is your first meeting. So we just have a quick and very important piece of business to get out of the way first, and that is the election of our board of directors as well as our officers. So the December meeting serves as the annual meeting for our 2021 board officers and board members. We'll need members of the Commuting Solutions this morning to use your chat function to make motions to approve these board officers and members. The officers and board members, if you could please turn on your cameras, because we want everybody to see who it is we're voting for this morning. We'll start with the approval of board officers, and I just want to say, as somebody who's relatively new to this organization now, I think three years in, I'm really impressed with the quality of knowledge on this board, and the depth of involvement in our relative communities. So I just want everybody in the membership to understand that you're voting for some very capable people. And I'm looking forward to this organization moving forward with some very important initiatives. So we'll start with the approval of the board officers. Next year, we are proposing that Rob Zaccaro with the city of Louisville will chair the board. And so let's make sure everybody's cameras are on. Vice chair will be Matt Brill, proposed to be Matt Brill from Google. We're proposing that treasurer Chris McShane from InBank. Secretary will be Erica Vandenbrand with the city of Boulder. And I will just continue to be the past chair. That's a pretty simple role as far as I understand. So may I have a motion and a second for this particular slate of officers? I don't know if that's happening in the chat. I'm not reading very well.
Craig, we have a motion by
Do we?
Kim Calamino with CU Boulder. Thank you, Kim. May we have a second, please?
Anyone? Second? Second. Thank you very much. Malcolm, good morning. All in favor? Well, let me just do it this way. Anyone opposed? Seeing or hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you for that. So next we'll approve the board members. Do this in the same way. I'll just introduce these folks, many of whom have been on the board now for some time, but then we have some brand new ones, and this is very exciting because of the involvement and the breadth of capabilities here. Phil Greenwald with the city of Longmont, Sarah Grant, city and county of Broomfield, Julie Pillar, Sister Carmen Community Center, Jordan Swisher with Brew Baucol, Heidi Van Genderen with CU Boulder, Jessica Erickson, Longmont Economic Development Partnership, and Julie Isom, of Vista Adventist Hospital. May we again have a motion and a second for these. We already have a move approval from Roger Sherman. Thank you, Roger. Anybody second? Second. Thanks very much, Kim. Anyone opposed to this board of directors? Just a second. It looks as though everybody feels quite good about this group of people. Motion carries. Thanks everybody for that. And I appreciate the involvement of these fantastic people on our board. Welcome to the board of directors. And at the end of the meeting, I'll hand the virtual gavel over to Rob. Thanks very much for taking over. We would like to next welcome our very special guest. And but we'll first take some time to kind of ground Ms. Debra Johnson in what our priorities and thoughts are here in the Northwest Metro region. But we're going to be introducing Debra Johnson, RTD's general manager and CEO. And we'll be doing some coalition building and advocacy, we hope. We're very excited to have her here this morning. It's sort of like her introduction to the Northwest Metro region. But before I provide an overview of Ms. Johnson's background and introduce her, we have prepared a presentation to provide her an overview of regional transportation background and priorities for our region in the Northwest Metro area. Please welcome Executive Director Audrey DeBarros. Audrey?
Thank you, Craig. And Debra, we want to wish you a warm welcome to the Northwest Metro region. We're so glad you are able to join us here today, along with your colleagues on the board of directors. So next slide, please. So we just wanted to give you a brief overview of our organization and our history of advocacy and innovation for the Northwest Metro region, recognizing, I believe, that this is one of your first meetings with our coalition. So we wanted to fully embrace that opportunity. Next slide, please. This slide was scrolling as folks were joining the meeting, but just to make sure you know that we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We are the transportation management organization for the Northwest Metro region. And our mission as a nonprofit is to connect people to places in the Northwest Metro region for today and the future. We achieve our mission mainly through advocacy, innovation, and public education. Next slide. Joining Commuting Solutions in our advocacy work is the Northwest Mayors and Commissioners Coalition. They were founded in 1999 to really galvanize local elected official advocacy work, historically for the US 36 corridor between Boulder and Denver. This was a very outdated roadway, yet it was the lifeline, the economic lifeline for commuters and the jurisdictions along US 36. So Boulder, Boulder County, Longmont, Superior, Broomfield, and Westminster. And together with RTD, CDOT, and the High Performance Transportation Enterprise, the MCC, Commuting Solutions, all of our chambers of commerce in this area really came together to prioritize reconstructing US 36 into a multimodal corridor. The project was a very significant accomplishment for the Northwest region. It was a $500 million investment, and it really was a true partnership between the local communities, RTD, CDOT, the High Performance Transportation Enterprise. And, you know, it is one of our proudest accomplishments that we achieved in partnership with RTD. Some of the public policy transportation items that we all work on together is support of bidirectional lanes on I-25. As you'll get to know the Denver region, currently the lane on I-25 is one way going into Denver in the morning and leaving Denver in the afternoon. Yet we have bus rapid transit on US 36, which is bidirectional. So in the future, we want to address that so that we have very efficient BRT service in both directions. We believe that any new capacity should be managed through express lanes that, you know, general purpose lanes, especially in the metropolitan area. There just isn't sufficient funding in Colorado for general capacity lanes, and that we should manage capacity through express lanes. We are very proud of our accomplishment of adding a corridor-wide bikeway along US 36, which is used very efficiently and effectively by commuters. And that is a blueprint of adding bikeways that we want to roll out in other parts of the metropolitan area. In anticipation of rail and to address safety improvements, now we have been working, all of our jurisdictions have been working to make sure that railroad safety improvements are made and that the future Northwest corridor railroad crossings are quiet zones. So that's a work in progress that is getting a lot of traction. And we believe that we need more funding for multimodal transportation in Colorado. And last but not least, NAM's recommendations. This stands for the Northwest Area Mobility Study, which you'll hear about in a moment. Next slide, please. So Commuting Solutions, we have an outstanding relationship with RTD, both working on regional transportation planning, which you'll hear more about in a little bit here. We are a stakeholder in the RTD Reimagine process. We have implemented, in partnership with your staff, first and final mile studies for the US 36 corridor and starting one or completing one for State Highway 119. And we also serve an avid role around teaching the public about riding transit, both through the general public as well as employer outreach. So we are here to help work with RTD on increasing ridership. Next slide, please. So in the RTD Fast Tracks plan that was approved back in 2004, our region had two primary investments. One is the Flatiron Flyer Bus Rapid Transit Service, which connects the city of Boulder to Denver Union Station and beyond. This was the first BRT system in the Denver region. It's a very successful service. Around 13,000 commuters use that service prior to COVID on each workday. So I like to call it the workhorse of our corridor. It was a partnership, as I mentioned earlier, with the US 36 Coalition, CDOT, and the High Performance Transportation Enterprise. And the BRT service utilizes the express lanes. There is an agreement between RTD and the HPTE that there will not be so much congestion, auto congestion in that lane so as to prevent the BRT service from operating at, I believe it's 55 miles per hour. So very reliable service between Denver and Boulder. And again, this was a big partnership with our region. Next slide, please. I did want to mention real quick that in terms of the Flatiron Flyer and BRT service, there are still capital construction and service commitments to US 36 BRT in the Fast Tracks budget. So that's something that we definitely want to continue discussing with you and your staff. In 2013, after it became clear that there wasn't sufficient funding to complete Northwest Rail in the near term, RTD funded a collaborative study with the jurisdictions in the Northwest Metro region in CDOT to build consensus around short, near, and long-term transit investments, recognizing that our region continues to grow in employment and in population, and we really need to define how we will move our region in the near term. And so this study is really important to our region, and it's something that we draw upon in terms of the consensus priorities around transit investment. So the study included validating the Fast Tracks commitments to US 36 BRT. It identified 6 arterial BRT corridors that had high potential for good transit ridership, excellent transit ridership. It included commuter bikeways, addressing the bidirectional need of the I-25 US 36 express lane that I mentioned earlier, and of course, completion of Northwest Rail. Next slide, please. And this is just a map to show you the regional priorities for our area. So it includes, again, completing Northwest Rail. Currently, the first 6 miles opened in 2016 to serve Denver to Westminster, but full completion of that line is a commitment that we still want to make possible. It includes adding BRT service on State Highway 119, US 287, State Highway 7, 120th Avenue in Broomfield, South Boulder Road in Boulder County, which connects Boulder to Louisville, and then State Highway 42 in Lafayette and Louisville to US 36. So really, this is an important map that, again, we draw upon as our regional consensus for transit priorities. Next slide, please. And then I just added a few slides to give you a quick thumbnail on the top 3 corridors, arterial BRT corridors that are moving through environmental planning and design. The first one is State Highway 119. RTD completed a planning and environmental linkage study in 2019, and it found that it recommended adding managed express lanes, a corridor-wide bikeway, and bus rapid transit on that corridor between Boulder and Longmont. It is estimated to cost $253 million, and together with RTD, CDOT, and the local communities of Boulder, Boulder County, and Longmont, $93 million has already been identified for a first phase of construction, of which $30 million comes from RTD base system funding. So in 2019 or 2021, CDOT will be moving into final design for this corridor, and we ideally want to begin a first phase of construction in 2023. Next slide, please. And this is a map that shows the corridor, primarily the proposed bikeway alignment. So bicycling is an important commuting option in our region, and we have great success with the US 36 bikeway. And now we are adding another corridor bikeway, or planning a corridor-wide bikeway along State Highway 119. We are also completing a first and final mile study along 119 next year to help improve connectivity by bike and pedestrian to the future BRT stations. Next slide, please. The next priority is State Highway 7, which is the main east-west corridor between Boulder and Brighton. So serving several jurisdictions along that important corridor where there is tremendous economic development and growth anticipated. There has been already significant design that has been completed. The jurisdictions work together to commit $10 million to develop a corridor development plan, which has began in 2019 and will continue into next year. And also part of this project is a connection to the I-25 State Highway 7 intersection where a mobility hub is planned. I'm sure you'll hear more about that in the future. Next slide, please. And then the third arterial BRT corridor I wanted to mention is US 287, which connects Longmont, Boulder County, the town of Erie, City of Lafayette, City and County of Broomfield to US 36, and then to Denver. The Boulder County has started a feasibility study for BRT this year, which will carry into next year. And that feasibility study also includes analyzing a corridor-wide bikeway. Next slide, please. Northwest Rail and Front Range Passenger Rail. You're familiar with this conversation. We participated in a call with you last week regarding this. So we just are here to echo the sentiments of that call and of our local politicians that completing Northwest Rail is an important issue for our region, and we are eager to identify 30% design funds through the FISA account so that the Burlington Northern can proceed with that design work for us for the peak service Northwest Rail exploration. And we are interested in learning more about the Northwest Rail alignment that has been proposed by Front Range Passenger Rail and how that can be the preferred alignment as part of that feasibility study. Next slide, please. So collaboration and partnership is really important to the Northwest Metro region, that we really stand ready to work with you and your staff and the board of directors. We are big fans of RTD and of public transit. Some of the highest transit ridership comes from this region, especially the city of Boulder, where there are thousands of EcoPass. Recognizing COVID has impacted transit ridership for RTD, we are here to partner with you as people feel safe to come back to transit to try to spark that ridership, and eager to look at new ideas for how we can bring people back to RTD. We know RTD has big problems to solve, and we believe that partnerships with private sector, businesses, local governments, nonprofits, that we can work together to rethink how transit service should be delivered or could be delivered in the Northwest region and beyond. I mentioned the comment regarding furthering peak service Northwest Rail and identifying design funds for the Burlington Northern. I know that Director Guissinger and Director Rivera-Malpiede have been discussing how we can simplify past program pricing in order to make it more attractive to more people. So that's something that we would love to collaborate with you and your staff on. Is there any more? I think that's it. Next slide, please. So thank you, Debra Johnson. Again, welcome to the Northwest Metro region. And I believe Craig was going to provide an overview of your very impressive background. So Craig, I'll toss it back to you.
Well, thank you very much for that summary. And it's such a great demonstration, Audrey, of the completeness of our plan in the Northwest Metro region, as well as the very strong consensus among some diverse communities on how to move forward with our mobility needs here. I hope that really does come through to our guests today. Yes, let's talk a little bit about the impressive background of our new RTD CEO and General Manager. Debra Johnson's public transportation journey began as a child in Fresno, California. It encompasses more than a quarter century of leadership, honed at some of the largest transit agencies in the US, including the San Francisco Bay Area, Washington, DC, and Southern California. Ms. Johnson joined RTD in August this year from Long Beach Transit, where she served as Deputy CEO of the Southern California Agency. Prior to that, she held executive positions at the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority, the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, and the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. She moved into the public sector service after beginning her transportation career in the private sector in the Bay Area. Now, Ms. Johnson holds a Master of Arts degree in Public Administration from California State University, Hayward, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in International Relations from the University of California, Davis. And we all are very excited to hear from you this morning, Debra. Welcome to the good people of Denver's Northwest Metro region.
Thank you very kindly for the opportunity to be before you this morning. I appreciate that warm introduction. Do want to qualify that I actually have been on the job less than 30 days, as my official start date was November 9th. I thank Commuting Solutions to come before you, and appreciate Executive Director Barros that very in-depth orientation as to the agency. So thank you very kindly. In relationship to me, just a little bit about my background. You did hear some things about that, but I like to qualify myself as a person in the people business. I am a fervent believer that public transportation is the vehicle, pun intended, that enables people to be unleashed from their limitations in reference to having access to not only medical appointments, opportunities as it relates to job access and higher education. For me personally, I enjoy this work tremendously, and being a servant leader due to the fact I believe it's very important when you look at the diverse transit ridership across this great country, that oftentimes it's women of color, single mothers of color that are most reliant. And that has been basically emphasized during the course of these unprecedented times relating to the pandemic, whereby we see our frontline employees being essential employees, moving essential workers that have kept this economy moving. So for me, sitting in this seat currently, I believe that I bring the voice to the voiceless, and it is important to me to have that representation from going to the bus stop to the boardroom in order to basically actually put real life experience front and center as we talk about public transport. As it relates to what I've been doing for the past 29 days here, when I first embarked upon this journey, expressing my interest in this job, I outlined a transitional plan and what I'd like to qualify as my initial 120-day plan. In doing so, basically, it's important to me that I get a broader understanding of what it is that I don't know. So during the first phase of all of this, which has taken place in my past 25 days, it's really been an onboarding session for me, whereby I have been acquainting myself with our priorities in relationship to the board of directors, more so acquainting myself, with employees, customers, stakeholders. Had the opportunity to sit in a myriad of meetings, make contact and familiarize myself with some critical transportation issues relevant to the region. And quite naturally, I'd be remiss not to acknowledge fast tracks and, you know, the Northwest Corridor, and being one, and more specifically, the accountability committee that has been convened to basically take a laser-like focus on how the Regional Transportation District can enhance our ability to deliver quality transportation service to this vast region. More so engaging with stakeholders that is a cross section as well as with our union leadership. And what I am doing with that information is honing in and having a better understanding of what my issues action plan would be. And as of yesterday, I have completed 57 meetings, and they're basically listening sessions where I'm going through asking 5 key questions. And in doing so, it's for me to identify some commonalities and some themes. And quite naturally, I can share at this juncture, I sort of had this going into this entire phase, that basically we need to be highly communicative. RTD and the people that make up this organization, the men and women, do great work, but it's very analogous to a tree falling in the forest. If you don't hear it, do you know if it really fell? So when we talk about what it is that we're doing, we have to be engaged. We have to leverage our relationships and strengthen those relationships, and basically be able to partner in such a way where we bring transportation solutions to the entire fold. And I recognize in this geographic area as well that there's concern as it relates to what has been qualified as geographic equity. I'm still wrapping my mind around actually what that is, because I've had conversations and receive a myriad of different responses, but recognizing that I want to learn so I can help be a catalyst in the solution realm of all those things, because I pride myself on being a continuous learner. And also being open to new ideas and creative solutions, because just because we did it some way before and we don't see the results we want to see, that doesn't mean that there's not a better way in which to do it. And I am hard fast in my beliefs that basically working cooperatively and collaboratively with others that aren't necessarily transportation, I wouldn't say professionals, but possess that acumen, we could basically bridge the gap in reference to some of these solutions, and leveraging what I heard during the course of the executive director's presentation relative to being creative, seeking out different partnerships in order to create a comprehensive transportation network for this region. So when I envision what my plan is, as relates to partnerships, it's basically sitting at the table and leaning in and talking about what can be, as opposed to what was. As I've been sharing with the myriad of folks that I've engaged with over these past 30 days, one thing's for certain is that, being in the transportation space, and if you see any bus operator, he or she is looking out the front windshield when they're driving, not the rear view mirror. So recognizing that we have a myriad of things that have taken place in the past, let's look forward to the future, because I am very excited about what lies ahead. And so, I think that's the attitude that needs to be apparent as we march down this path in these uncertain times. And more specifically, quite naturally, I touched upon briefly the accountability committee. As it relates to what's taking place there, look at those recommendations coming out of that body as being something in which the RTD needs to embrace, but needing to be at the table to talk through what the solutions are that are coming out, because recognizing that there are some things in a transportation space that one has to do, because we can't just go to a bus dealership, pick up a couple of buses and bring them back and put them into service. There's a lot of things that need to take place when you're trying to deliver quality transportation services. As we look to reducing our carbon footprint, what does that really mean if we were to go to zero emission vehicles? In reference to transitioning, we have to look at the infrastructure, we have to look at the range, we have to look at the technology. All of these things can happen. I must say that I had a role in my previous position in shepherding that as the lead executive with the California Air Resources Board to transition our fleet as of 2030 to an entire zero emission fleet. So it can be done. It takes patience, it takes perseverance, it takes cooperation and collaboration, but more so looking at what our assets are and identifying viable funding sources. As we all know, RTD was facing some financial hardships prior to COVID. The situation as it relates to the pandemic exacerbated that, recognizing that hard decisions had to be made to shore up our financial footing as we look at the next year and going into the second year. We recognize that we have to find some sustainable solutions for the betterment of our financial health. While these may appear to be challenges, I do believe that these are coupled with opportunities, and we just have to be willing to roll up our sleeves, look at what's before us, and, you know, be decisive in our course of action, because I am firmly confident that all of this is doable. We also have to ensure that we have open minds in relationship to what we thought might have been, but recognizing we can also open our minds to what could be. And so as I work with all of you all, working with my esteemed board of directors as well, with the men and women that make up this organization and all the stakeholders around this region, I believe that we all want the same thing. We want to ensure that we are providing viable transportation options to those in this great region, and I believe that it is doable. We may have some uncomfortable conversations. They may be difficult to hear, but when we step back, I'm a firm believer that bad news doesn't get better with time. So putting our cards out on the table at the outset and basically being willing to play a hand, we can solve the issues before us. So I'll stop speaking at this point and basically pass the baton. I know there may be questions for me, and I'm ready to address those. So thank you very kindly for your attention and the opportunity to speak before you.
Thank you, Deborah. All very encouraging to hear. We do have a question already from our newly elected Boulder County Commissioner, Claire Levy. And you just touched on the COVID crisis and its impact on budgets. She specifically was asking about how RTD will be dealing with drivers and hiring and retention of drivers. And have you had a chance to get a grounding on that? I'm going to guess probably not, but it certainly is a unique part of this problem. Ridership, of course, and revenues, but then we also have this issue with drivers and finding qualified people to run the routes.
So thank you. That's a very good question. As we talk about our frontline operators, I think it's paramount that we change our mindset. Oftentimes in this industry, we want somebody that has had driving experience. I'm a firm believer that we need to ensure that people have the values that are reflective of the type of service that we want to deliver. I can teach somebody how to drive a vehicle, but I cannot teach them to operate with integrity. I can't teach them to have interpersonal skills. Those are generally things that are innate. So when we look at where we are in the course of this pandemic and we look at the industries hardest hit, I'm talking about hospitality, retail, leisure, and things of the like. Those individuals that work in that realm tend to have more customer-centric skills. So basically, I think we need to change our mindset in reference to how we go about attracting individuals that could be the ambassadors, that could be those individuals that make someone want to return to utilize our services. So as we talk about the issue at hand, I have done some research, and I did this prior to coming to this agency, because attracting frontline bus and rail operators, it is not something that's just inherent to Denver RTD. It's something that's plagued us nationwide as an industry. So basically, thinking outside of the box, looking at what our eligibility requirements are, talking about the training in and of itself, and more or less, I think what a problem that remains apparent is pertaining to the retention of operators. Oftentimes in this industry, what we do is that we recruit operators and we may train them during the course of the day because it works for our schedules, and we're training them from 8 to 5. But when you come on board, typically you're in a unionized environment and pursuant to the collective bargaining agreement. The most recently hired has the last seniority. So one may be operating a vehicle at less opportune times. They may be operating routes, what we call owl service, the late night routes. So when you train somebody and you give them nearly 2 months of training when they're working from 8 to 5, and then after those 8 weeks are finished and they successfully pass their training, and then you're telling them they're coming to work at 8 o'clock at night, that's disingenuous, and basically we're not managing their expectations going forward. So I believe if we're more forthright in reference to what it is that we're doing, and we look for people that have inherent skills that are becoming of what we want to be, a customer-centric organization, I believe we can tackle this problem going full speed ahead by managing expectations on both sides of the fence.
What is your experience in public-private partnerships, and what do you think about them as a delivery mechanism for capital projects?
So in relationship to public-private partnerships, as it relates, I would assume you're talking about what we've done here. recognizing that the Eagle P3 project is the only operating transit public-private partnership in the country. So since I wasn't here, I don't have experience directly in relationship to a transit public-private partnership. But as we talk about public-private partnerships in a holistic fashion, I have had a myriad of experience. I have worked early on in my career as relates to partnering with private entities to basically fund stations and things of the like. More specifically, I'm talking about when I worked in the Silicon Valley area of the Bay in reference to working with Cisco Systems when they basically paid for a station so they could have it directly in front of their station to bring people from different parts of the Bay Area. That's one such example. Partnering with higher educational institutions, being down in Southern California to navigate the difficult roadway as the 405, as we know, is Carmageddon, to get people from the Long Beach, the other metropolitan area in Southern California, going into UCLA's campus of Westwood. So I have had experience partnering with different entities that have a vested interest, partnering with, you know, the Washington Redskins when I was in DC, when we extended our system due to the fact that Monday Night Football actually extends until midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning and our system closed. So working with the NFL to leverage a cost model whereby the NFL paid to keep our stations open so people could utilize the metro system in the greater Washington area. So those are just high level examples of public-private partnerships, but not in the traditional sense of what you may have been referencing.
That's very interesting. That's an interesting story. Obviously, greenhouse gas emissions is continuing to be a major challenge for transportation. In many parts of the United States, transportation now is the leading contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, above and beyond the electric power industry, for example. I mean, what do you think RTD is? Where do you think your thinking is on that particular issue relative to RTD?
Well, as I said before in some previous comments, recognizing that any transportation agency has a large role in reducing the carbon footprint, because not only can we aid to basically minimize our use on fossil fuel, it's taking cars off the road by putting people on mass transport. For those that aren't using our system, we're helping to clean the air and reducing the exposure to children, especially Black and brown children, to asthma. So as we look at it holistically, I think we can be a leader in that space, but recognizing it's going to take viable funding sources to ensure that comes to fruition. Quite naturally, as we look at our fleet being, they both iron, steel wheels, as well as rubber tire, when we're talking about, you know, bus and rail vehicles, keeping in mind that we leverage a lot of federal dollars in which to do so. So we do have an obligation to utilize that asset to the end of useful life. What we can do is basically assess where we are with our vehicles in relationship to the useful life, which is traditionally about 15 years for a bus. And quite naturally, that's the one that basically is emitting the most. And so as we look at it going forward, it's outlining what our plan can be going forward, and then investing in infrastructure. Recognizing this is technology that's evolving. It's very analogous to a cell phone technology, as we can see the various versions that come out. As it relates to the phones, I can think back when a cell phone was the size of a briefcase and you pulled it out and it looked like a brick, and now basically you have your own personal computer readily in your palm. So recognizing as we mature with the technology, we can extend the range. Right now, considering this expansive service area, I don't believe that we could basically do one fell swoop. We don't have the money to do so, but basically leveraging range extenders, inductive charging could be other options, but that could be costly as well. I think what would be most prudent is to have a phased-in approach, recognizing that we are going to have some aspects coming out of the legislature as it reduces to climate action and climate change and so forth. We could be at the forefront by leveraging it. Keep in mind now that RTD does have a fleet of battery electric vehicles that we utilize on our free mall shuttle, and we do have 36 of those, I believe. We do have experience with that, leveraging going forward, that we can capitalize on that experience and, you know, look at it in a holistic fashion to see where we could be in the next 20 years.
So I was wondering if you wouldn't mind if we did a little poll question here we prepared to help our members sort of express what they think is important to you. We like doing this on occasion because we think it's a great way to figure out what people are thinking. Sydney and Audrey, would you mind bringing up poll question number 1? What is the biggest challenge? This is to our membership. What is the biggest challenge you see facing RTD currently? And here are your choices: funding challenges, increasing ridership in the midst of COVID, unreliability of the system due to capacity limits and reduced service offerings, health and safety concerns due to COVID, or rebuilding public trust. Maybe they're all of concern to you, but let's try to choose just one. Oh, and any other one at the end. Sorry, didn't have that on my screen. Let's go ahead and select, and we'll take just a moment to tally the results. All right, when do the results come up?
Nick, could you display the results, please?
There we go. Well, perhaps unsurprisingly, funding challenges leads the pack. Debra, does that tell you anything you didn't already know?
No, I would agree wholeheartedly with the funding challenges as we look at what we're trying to do, where we're going, how we maintain our core system. Operating and maintenance costs, are increasing, but basically it also relates to our workforce having to pay people with the rising premiums with healthcare. All of these are intertwined, so it's no surprise to me looking at this response.
And one of the things that I've noticed in the chat this morning already is people talking about your statement around equity in the entire region. And I think that's really hitting people in a good way. So what challenges and opportunities have been presented to gain greater equity in your opinion?
So one thing for certain is I was trying to outline when we talk about equity, what does that really mean? Because I look at it through a couple of different lenses. I mean, there's, transit equity, access to a viable transportation network, which I do believe we have. It may not be the modalities that people want to see. As outlined, there is the first BRT system here with the Flatiron Flyer, but I recognize that there was a promise made to people within this region as it would be rail. So as we talk about equity, are we talking about it from a modality standpoint, or are we talking about having access to viable means of public transport? So that's something through my onboarding and listening sessions I'm trying to garner a better understanding of, because I have heard the term geographic equity, and really what does that mean as we talk about what public transport is. And so equity in and of itself, I'll say from my vantage point, is a myriad of different things. Basically, it's having, let me step back for a second, because oftentimes people confuse equality and equity. So I look at it as this. If in fact, you have somebody that's utilizing a mobility device, you have somebody who is 4 feet tall, and you have somebody who's 6 feet tall, if you all gave them the same bike, that's equality, but it's not equity. And so as we look at this in all certainty, we have to discern what it is that we're talking about as it relates to the means of public transport. Because are we trying to provide a transportation option that addresses the need of a geographic area that's more specific, and when you look at it, you're trying to traverse other areas within the greater region? So that's where I need to familiarize myself with the term that has been coming out of this region as it relates to geographic equity, if that makes sense to everyone.
Well, I really want to thank you, and I know all of us sincerely thank you for the time you spent with us this morning. The expanse of your experience says a lot about the care that the RTD Board of Directors has given your appointment, and we promise that we're going to be here to work hand in hand with you any way that we can in the Northwest Metro region. And we understand the great challenges that are ahead of you, and we want to be helpful in helping you achieve your goals. So thanks very much for being with us today.
And thank you all very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to collaborating and partnering with you all you know, as we march ahead. So thank you.
Well, have a great morning, and feel free to stay with us, or if you need to move on to a busy day, we will understand, of course.
I'm gonna stay. I have to see my bosses on their panel. So thank you.
All right, awesome. That's right. You might as well hear what they have to say. So RTD, of course, is such an important stakeholder in the Northwest Metro region. We're pleased to have several of the RTD board members with us today, including our newest one of our newest ones, board member-elect Erik Davidson. We've arranged a panel discussion to have an informational conversation about RTD. We've prepared several questions. We also have 3 poll questions to intersperse when we have the chance. Lastly, we'll also ask questions from the Q&A, so please don't hesitate to put your questions in the Q&A and we'll funnel them to our panelists. So we're pleased to welcome with us Angie Rivera-Malpiede, Chairperson of the RTD Board of Directors. She represents District C. Judy Lubow, District I. Judy's term, of course, is coming to an end in January, and we thank her for 8 years of great service on the RTD board. Erik Davidson was recently appointed by the Boulder County Commissioners to replace Judy for the 2-year term. Lynn Guissinger, District O, and former Commuting Solutions Board member. We welcome Angie, Judy, Lynn, and Erik. Hello, everybody.
Good morning.
Good
Nice
morning.
to see you. We have to give Angie the, the award for the best background for this particular segment. So, board members, why don't you introduce yourselves? Let's just start with Angie, since your name begins with an A, and let us know a little bit about yourself and what you see as important in RTD coming up.
Well, good morning, and thank you for inviting me. I actually wear a couple of different hats. I am extraordinarily honored to be serving as the chairman of the board for the RTD Board of Directors. I represent District C, which is predominantly the city of Denver, from the city limits on the north to Evans on the south, Colorado Boulevard and Brighton on the east, and Sheridan on the west, with a little bit of Wheat Ridge and Edgewater. So we all serve somewhere around 220,000 constituents. And within my geographic boundaries, it includes literally every walk of life. In my day job, I also serve as a Transportation Management Association director like Audrey. I run the Northeast Transportation Connections and have been doing that for the last 20 years or so as well, and serve as the vice president of the Foundation for Urban Sustainable Communities. And so my background is really in community advocacy, particularly to disenfranchised communities. And so my background really includes nonprofit work for over, I hate to say this number, 45 years. And I was 10 when I started. That still makes me old. But I have had the honor and the privilege to serve as the voice of people who are always not always at the table. So I just want to say how grateful I am to be invited, and how honored I feel that Audrey is my colleague and my friend. Thank you.
And we appreciate your great service. Thanks so much. Judy, would you like to take it from here?
Yes, I would. I'm listed as Lynn Guissinger, because Lynn was kind enough to send me her link when I couldn't get on this meeting. So we're both listed as Lynn, but I can assure you, there's my name, Judy. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, I am finishing my 2 terms. It's been extremely exciting, and it has been indeed a privilege to represent people moving forward with transit. I have enjoyed working with you guys. You're an incredible organization, and we've had a good run. The rollout of the Flatiron Flyer has been tremendous, and we've actually made some progress on the rail in that we're working on the peak service starter service. And in fact, when I ran both times, sometimes I think I must have been nuts to run the second time. 8 years is a long time. But both times was primarily my interest was getting us our rail, and I have spent a lot of time trying to get us that rail. And we have some improvement. We have the peak service as an idea that is valid and can work. Also, there's some very exciting things going on with Amtrak and state funding. So I'm hopeful, and I'm very excited that we have Erik, who will be taking my place, and I'm sure you will be delighted working with him, and also with our new general manager, Debra. So thank you all.
Thanks, Judy. Why don't we go to Erik now, who's taking Judy's place?
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's good to see you all. My name is Erik. I come from a private sector background. I've worked in the private sector as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a business leader. And I'm a huge believer in strong transit systems. Having lived in a number of metro areas and being a business owner, I believe passionately that we're at our best when everybody across our country can be involved in our systems equally, and transit is at the center of that. So I'm delighted to be joining the board and serving this district to help make RTD better and stronger, to help the region achieve its transit goals. I certainly am excited to engage with my colleagues to help bring riders back after we climb out of this terrible pandemic. I think we have experienced more than ever before that we have a lot of riders who really need our service, and the service is better when we're all using it and we're all involved. That's what helps keep it funded, and I look forward to tackling some big challenges in the years ahead.
And there might not be any shortage of those, Erik. Thanks very much. And finally, our good friend, Lynn Guissinger, former board member for Commuting Solutions. Good morning, Lynn.
Good morning, Craig. It's nice to be back and nice to be with Commuting Solutions. I think I rely often on Audrey and others in the organization as I move forward with the work. My name is Lynn Guissinger, and I am finishing my second year on the RTD board. I represent Western Boulder County, essentially. It's District O. I serve as treasurer of the board on the executive committee, and I'm also chair of the Communications and Government Relations Committee. So I'm working closely with the accountability committee. I have worked in the last year or so with our legislature and the lobbyists that we work with and all of that. My background is I practiced law, and I've been in Boulder since 1980, practiced law for a number of years in Boulder and Denver. And then I owned a company called Catalyst Communication that got me into the transportation advocacy world, mostly at that point through bicycle advocacy at various levels, federal, state, and local. And then I chaired the city's transportation advisory board for several years. And I'm happy to be here. My priorities for RTD, certainly doing what we can to stabilize financially, and that's going to be a lot of different pieces. I'm very excited to work with Debra. I feel like we have a fresh start here, and so I will be doing what I can to help get her launched and help with some of the issues that we're facing and some of the issues that the accountability committee is bringing forward. I think that bringing ridership back after the pandemic is a critical piece that we need to finish solidifying a plan for. And one of the pieces that I'm focused on right now is working towards creating smaller committees that can really delve into some of these issues on the board and working with the staff. Thanks.
Well, that's a great jumping off point then, Lynn, for questions. What do the rest of you think are some of the functional ways that the board of directors can look at handling this immediate problem of funding and COVID related detriment to the financial picture that RTD faces? Angie?
Thank you. Well, I just want to join Lynn in all of the components that she just talked about. Pre-COVID, RTD was serving somewhere around 360,000 boardings a day. We are significantly below that, 60% to be precise. And, you know, who knew that this year would be filled with such amazing changes to our world as we know it from years before, right? And so everything that's been written and planned and evaluated went out the door. And we needed to think fast and we needed to think on our feet. And really, it has been an extraordinary year of learning new ways to work together to make sure that we are providing services to the entire region that we represent. Clearly, stabilizing our financial picture is number one. We have to do that in order to make sure that this agency will continue to serve the region that we are elected to really take on. The other thing is, in light with COVID and the fear that is amongst our communities has really had a significant impact on people writing our services. I did a safety moment last week, and one of the things that I talked about was going online. And in my neighborhood, 80211, there's 100,000 residents. And out of that 100,000 residents, something like 35,969 of them had tested positive for COVID. You know, that is an astronomical number. And I think that what we're dealing with is making sure that people understand that transit is a safe mechanism of getting from point A to point B. And a lot of folks are still struggling with what is actually okay to do and not to do. And so that is something that we have to deal with on a regular basis. I do think that we are at the crossroads of a clean slate here. We have a new general manager. We have the first woman in the history of RTD. And we're looking at our structure on how we function as board members in terms of our committee sizes and what is it that we're working on. And really, is the old way that we've worked around programs and ideas still valid? Or do we really need to take a fresh look at everything and move forward? And that's kind of where I'm coming from. The ad hoc committees that we have formulated has brought smaller groups of people together to dive into issues and really bring some clarity to it, right? The accountability committee I have always seen as a collaboration with the governor and the legislature with the RTD board to look at what is best for the entire region. And I think that this year, what I'd like to focus on is that it's a new day, it's a new world, and it's going to take all of us together to make sure that this transit agency is the best in the country, like it used to be several years ago.
Well, Judy, as you listen to Angie talk about maybe it's time to relook at some things we've been doing all along, as you hand the baton over to Erik in your region, how much of business as usual needs to change, do you think?
Well, especially coming from this area where we have not gotten the rail that was promised, there's a great deal of dissatisfaction. I don't know if it's throughout the entire district, but our particular area has a lot of dissatisfaction. And I've been pushing for a very long time for change. So I personally am one of the board members, like Angie, who are extremely excited by the accountability committee, thinking of it as a chance to make real changes. And one of the things I think that really needs to happen is there needs to be a much better collaboration and partnership with our stakeholders. We don't have that yet. We need a two-way communication. In my opinion, in the past, it was pretty much RTD basically told people what they needed to do and what they could do in transit. And what's happening now, I believe, with our new CEO, and certainly with the board and also the accountability committee, is that we are looking outward and trying to create a two-way conversation so we can see how to move forward better. I personally think that RTD should be doing a survey among the stakeholders, among people like who are at Commuting Solutions, who are very knowledgeable about transportation issues, about what needs to change and what ideas you guys have for us to be doing things differently. And one of the things that I just comes to my mind is the idea of collaboration about changes in transit ideas in what the routes are going to look like. Has that been working? I mean, I've always felt for a long time that we really needed more interaction with the stakeholders, even as we go forward and propose changes, that we should get their feedback at an earlier level. And that's just one idea. I really believe there are folks out there, including you guys, that have a lot of good ideas about how we could be doing things better. And I think we need to share those ideas together.
Erik, I saw you nodding in agreement with what Judy was talking about, especially around collaboration. Would you like to take it from there as far as what you see in the future here?
Sure. Yeah, I would just completely echo sentiments of Director Lubow. We need to have a culture of partnership, and we need to have our communication be two-way, be listening more than we speak. The region has grown a lot. We've had a lot of challenges across our system. It's no secret we have financial challenges. Our debt service is at $257 million this year. It's been consistently growing. It will be $263 million next year. There are a lot of challenges we face, and I've been an entrepreneur a number of times in my career. I've been the underdog, and the way you work through those challenges is partnering, is working together with other folks in similar positions that have different strengths and weaknesses. And I see tremendous opportunity, particularly in this region, to strengthen our partnerships, to listen to our city councils, to listen to our transit management organizations. I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And, you know, certainly rail is a good example of one of those where we're in a big challenge from a capital funding standpoint. And looking towards partnerships, looking towards all the folks who want to see that happen is going to be the way we climb out of that. And we need to have a conversation that's two-way to find those solutions.
So this morning, I hope that we showed Debra Johnson our resolve on our plan here in the Northwest Metro region, which is our NAMs, specifically the BART corridors along Highway 119, State Road 7, US 287. It's our region's top near-term priorities. So I'm wondering how each of you, well, let's talk about the three who are remaining. Judy, I know you can answer as well. How each of you plans to work to advance those. I know, Judy, you've been working all along to advance those. And other BRT corridors include South Boulder Road, State Highway 42, and 120th Avenue. Lynn, would you like to go?
Sure. The biggest of those BRT corridors right now, of course, is Highway 119. And there have been issues that have come up recently as we had to make difficult budget cuts. And going back to the theme that I was hearing before, and I totally agree with, that the partnerships here made a huge difference, because when Heather McKillop to the board the idea of pushing back RTD's $30 million funding from 2023 to 2026. My first step was to call Audrey Debra and Kathleen Brackey, and they were able to give me the information. You know, doing that, RTD's money, the $30 million, is the seed money that really raised the other 93, with a lot of effort from Boulder County and the cities in Boulder County. But you know, everything from the transit hub first in Maine and Longmont to the BAT lanes in Boulder, the design of Highway 119 bikeway, the commitment by CDOT of, I think it's $40 million or $41 million. All of that really rested on the funding from RTD, and we were able to show that, to keep that money in. I think it's also the Highway 7 Coalition. I attend that. Erik and I were talking about it this morning. And I'll just say on a micro level, I think that our partnerships up here, working with Judy, has been great. She brings a very refreshing voice and leadership to the board. And already I'm working a lot with Erik, and we're setting up plans to go visit and meet with some of the various city councils and commissioners. All of that's important. That's, I think that working on 119, staying in touch and working with Highway 7, and then we'll be rolling out our efforts more on the other NAMS corridors.
I'd like to say something too.
Not sure where Craig went, but I'd say go ahead.
Okay, okay, good. Yeah, thank you. I just want to say that this corridor, the ability to work together and raise money and find diverse funding sources has been so inspirational. And I'm sure we must continue to do that. It's really been quite astounding to see the money come in through the different sources. So we have to do that with all of these projects.
Sydney, could we please lead out with the next poll question? Let's get some input from folks. Okay, here's our second poll to ask participants to respond to. What are the transit service delivery topics you would like to see RTD prioritize in 2021? And it's a multiple choice question. The answers are planning and strategizing for peak service Northwest Rail, lowering cost of fares and pass programs, ensuring customer safety on transit during COVID, increasing levels of service to pre-COVID service, expanding BRT service on 119 or others. So please submit your response or responses to the chat or to the poll. Thanks. May we have the results, please? Okay, the winner is, or the highest priority is increasing levels of service to pre-COVID service levels, followed by planning and strategizing for peak service Northwest Rail. So if any of you have a response to those questions, feel free to chime in, please.
Well, this is Judy. I think that we would all love to see pre-COVID service, but that you know, it's going to have to wait until circumstances change. We are basically surviving such a huge hit in our ridership and in our finances that this is a time where we have to be nimble and play things by ear, because financially we're hurting and we can't just go back to what was. We don't have the money for that. I do want to say about the peak service, I'm sure folks are aware that there's been discussions about possible federal funding through Amtrak, and also from the state, the Front Range Commuter Rail Commission. And so that is very exciting news, and we're working with those people to try to see if we can piggyback. So that's it for me.
That is exciting progress to have another option for rail service in our region. And we did have a tie at 33% with strategizing on peak service Northwest Rail, as well as expanding BRT service on 119. Let's go to another question that we wanted to ask. We have time for a couple more here. Speaking of Northwest Rail, Angie, if I may ask you, Northwest Rail is, one of the 2 fast tracks commitments to our region. What are the steps do you think that the RTD board and staff could take to help us move forward with peak service Northwest Rail, that exploration?
Well, you know what, Audrey, I'm glad you're asking that question, because I think the thing that is really important to me as a board member, and that we really have the opportunity to have a clean slate and kind of start from scratch with no kind of idea of what's happened or what needs to happen, is that I think we all just need to sit down together and talk about what we need to do to move things forward in a realistic fashion. And looking at the past isn't going to help us whatsoever. I do think, though, that we have the opportunity right now to really collaborate and look at different ways of making sure and being innovative and creative by collaborating with partners we've never even thought of doing before. And I think that Judy really hit it on the head when she said, you know, RTD's been the agency of no. And I think we need to change that to the agency of let's sit down and talk about a solution together. So I think the Northwest Corridor is extraordinarily important for the region and its success. And the other part of it for me is really understanding the diversity of the people who live along this corridor, who really have to utilize it to get to and from work, wherever that is. And the more that we can build out the Northwest Rail to support the entire community and those who have been gentrified out of downtown, it's going to serve the entire community, which is really the number one issue for me. So as a board member, I am very eager to sit down with the members of your community to talk about solutions, ideas, and really brainstorm and come up with an idea, because I think we can pull it off together.
Thank you. We'll be sure to follow up. Thank you, Angie. Director Guissinger, can you please give us an update on the work of the RTD Accountability Committee? You know, you can, and if you could give a quick overview of the purpose of this group, that would be great. But we hear some recommendations are going to be coming out pretty soon.
Sure. The RTD Accountability Committee came about after Senate Bill 151 sort of died in the Senate last year, which had a number of different provisions and ideas about changes for RTD. And it was the legislature, the Transportation Committee chairs, Matt Gray, Representative Gray, and Senator Winter, we're working with the governor's office to move forward on the committee, and Angie and I started working with them and say, you know, we need to be part of this. So we helped to put together the accountability committee. It's 11 members, and then there are 2 ex officio members from the board. It's Troy Whitmore and me. And they started in July of last year. They'll finish in July of this year, making recommendations on a number of things. I think that the December, actually, I think it'll be out in January, the interim report that's not required, but they are planning to do one, that the main suggestions will be some specific changes to the RTD statute to create more flexibility for RTD, having to do with allowing charging for parking, which is not something that I think, you know, the board is well aware that charging for parking is often seen as another way of raising fares. I don't think there's a view of that, but it's a matter of creating flexibility. So parking, TOD, fare box recovery, there's several changes that are being proposed. And then the committee has broken up into 3 subcommittees: governance, operations, and finance. And they're looking at a number of questions that, as I mentioned, the RTD board and staff are looking at as well, for things like changes potentially to the past programs, to try to use them to bring people back and solve some of the concerns people have had. Changes to the LIVE program, that's the low income program. There's been a lot of work that's gone into it. It's a very good start, but there are issues around accessibility and trying to make it easy for the population, the low income population, to apply and get in. Around governance, one of the big proposals that they're looking at is creating a set up local councils along the line of the sub-regional forums that are used by Dr. Cog in the TIP planning, and looking at the board, and if there's a hybrid with at-large members, or if some should be appointed and things like that. I want to echo what Debra said, is that one of the things I really think needs to happen now is, and really hope happens, is to get the accountability committee working with the RTD board in moving some of these forward. There are a lot of details, a lot of how things work that are known within RTD and need to really be dealt with as the accountability committee moves forward in some of those things. So that's one of the things I'll be urging at this point, so we can make these proposals things that really work for RTD and for the region, and to answer the issue that we've all mentioned of making sure we have local voices heard in a much more meaningful way.
Thank you for that overview, Lynn. We'll be eager to see the results of this interim report coming out next month. So I have one more question, and then we'll need to wrap up. Can you please give us an update on the RTD budget? I read last week that layoffs had started last week, so that's unfortunate news, but anticipated. So whoever would like to respond to that. Thank you.
You're all quiet. Lynn, I'm gonna let you go ahead and start with that one.
Okay. And I have one other thing I'd like to add too, but I'd say in the budget, the sales and use tax numbers are coming in better than we expected, which is great news. The leads forecast that we received maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago was much better than expected. Our fare recovery is not coming in as well, but that's a smaller portion of our overall funding. So at this point, we've had to make budget cuts to meet an expected deficit in 2021 of $140 million. Unfortunately, that is the reason for the layoffs that are about to take place in January. It'll be approximately 400 people, and of that, approximately 300 of those are our frontline workers, our operators and represented staff. I think one of our goals for all of us along the lines of the poll that was just answered, bringing back service also means we can bring back our employees. And that's a critical piece. No one likes layoffs. There are other, there's a whole group of cuts that were recommended by a task force that our interim general manager put together and Bruce Abel led. And they include, and the board has adopted most of those. And they include temporary salary cuts for employees making over $60,000 with the highest cuts at the highest level. They include all kinds of standard cuts, travel, memberships, just a number of things like that. And when we reach a balanced budget, my hope is that sales and use tax will continue to come in higher, and we'll be able to start bringing, and ridership will come in, and we'll be able to start bringing people back. I just want to add one other thing that Judy has mentioned a couple times, which are these, and I know that many of the people here maybe were involved in a call last week about Northwest Rail, that there are the Front Range Passenger Rail and Amtrak both have proposals that may be something we can fit together with Northwest Rail and work. It might be a way of finding the money for that service. We have a meeting tomorrow. I have a meeting with our federal lobbyists to explain all of that to them, so they can really begin to keep track of it and have our voice heard on that as well. Thanks.
I'd like to say something. As Lynn said, nobody likes cuts in employees. We have been working very, very hard to reduce the number of people that we had to cut. It was reduced, I think it initially started out at something like 800 people, and it's been reduced to about 400, which is still too high. But you know, we're not the federal government. We cannot print money to deal with our financial problems. We have to operate in the black. And we've had such a cut, not only in money, but in ridership, that we couldn't just continue keeping people on. But we're doing everything possible. And the board has told that to the staff, do everything possible to reduce the number of people that have to be cut and then to bring them back on when it's appropriate.
I would just also like to add that I think as an oncoming board member, I think for me, the mission is clear that next year, it is the board's job to have a rider focus and an operator focus and to be loud in a time when we do need assistance. As Director Lubow mentioned, we are not the federal government, but there is a federal government there, and the CARES Act was meaningful to RTD this past year from what I've seen on our current budget. We need to be loud and we need to advocate for what we need with a focus on protecting our operators, keeping our operators, and certainly protecting and maintaining our ridership as well. That the mission is clear for what we have to do in 2021.
And Audrey, I would just like to end by saying thank you to these board members for their insight. The only other thing that I would add to that is, in addition to all of the tremendous cuts that the board approved, it included furlough days as well. So we really did do a deep cut into RTD, and understanding that we are talking about 400 families, not just 400 employees. And we want to make sure that we're going to be able to provide as much support to them as possible, and trying to be creative and sustainable. And for instance, one of the things they're looking at doing is decreasing the allied security firm and increasing the number of maybe potentially drivers to be trained as, fare inspectors, so that they will stay employed at RTD until the ridership comes back on. So we're really trying to be very, very creative to support our employees.
Well, thank you, Audrey, for taking over in my brief absence. And thank you to our board members today from RTD. This has been a great conversation. We could continue, but we've come up against our time. But we really do, Commuting Solutions, appreciate your commitment to this region and to the state of Colorado. We hope that by this time next year, we'll be talking about how all of those people have been hired back and that we've returned to at least our previous levels of service and perhaps even added, because that's what our sincere effort is, to partner with you in helping you achieve that vision. So thanks again for joining us this morning, and I hope that Debra Johnson has heard some things that can help her in achieving her goals as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, okay, that's it. We've run up against the end of our time today. Thanks for attending our final membership meeting of the year. We want to thank our sponsors again: Colorado High Performance Transportation Enterprise, Elevations Credit Union, Google, and RTD. And today is Colorado Gives Day. Let's not forget, because it's the day of philanthropy in our state, and we do encourage you to give to Commuting Solutions, because we have a lot of work to do, and we can only do it with your support. Colorado Gives Day, please join and give today. The last thing I want to say is let's promote one of the biggest events of next year, which will be starting January the 7th, the 12th Legislative Breakfast. Last year we had over 200 people attend. This year it will be virtual, but I think we can even surpass the number of people who can attend this year. We'll be talking about collective accomplishments in transportation. We've heard that there is some exciting news perhaps on attempts to find statewide funding this year during the session. And I'm very excited to announce that Alice Jackson, the CEO of Xcel Energy, will be joining us, and we'll be talking about things that my company in particular, Xcel Energy, is doing to promote electric vehicles and to lower the emissions for the transportation sector. So that's a very big event, and please join us for that. We'll be having more information coming to you shortly. So on behalf of Commuting Solutions, the board of directors, the staff, have a great day and have a great holiday season. See you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye,
Thank you.
Audrey.
Thank you, RTD.
Bye, Audrey.
Bye-bye.